So we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order at 7:07 p.m. If everyone had a chance to look over the minutes, I just need a motion to accept and second.
Second.
Did you hear that, Bethany?
No, who are the first and second?
Mike Anderson first, Jerry second.
All right.
Okay, and this is where I turn the meeting over to Debbie to enlighten us and introduce our guests.
Thank you, Regina. And good evening to everybody, including those people in the chambers that we cannot see, but apparently they can see us and hear
Yeah.
us. So that's great. Yeah, I wanted to first of all introduce Bonnie Romeyer, who's now able to hear us. Bonnie will be on our team. And she is an attorney, has been a solicitor I've worked with for many, many years, has worked in a number of Emerald Charter communities of various types. I think they came from townships, third-class cities, and otherwise. And she's here to kind of keep us from doing anything that we shouldn't be doing. Bonnie, if you want to say anything or introduce yourself at all, feel free.
I am so happy to be working with you guys, and I look forward to helping you through this process. I've worked with many home rule communities. I've worked with some that changed from township to home rule while I was their solicitor. I've worked with referendums. I've pretty much done it all over the past 30 some years. So, and I don't know how that's possible when I'm only 25.
That's
So.
true. I know. We couldn't have worked together
No
for
wonder
40
how.
years or more because we're so young, right? Okay, so a couple things I wanted to do, just sort of housekeeping. The one thing, and I'm going to share the screen. Apparently, you guys can all see the screen, so I'm going to put this up for a minute. Just to check, and I'll probably do this from time to time to make sure that our schedule is where we want it to be, right? I had put this together, I think, when we first started with this process right after the election last year. Hi, Neil.
Hello.
Hi, Neil.
How you doing?
Hello.
So we're
That's my
just
grandson. Sorry.
That's okay. So we're just checking in on the schedule, and I was saying to people when I first logged in, we're actually close to being on time. I know everyone feels a little pressure and like we're behind, but we're actually not. And I have not updated this. This is what we put together from the very beginning. And we really had January and February of this year as sort of meeting with focus groups and making a decision about whether to move forward with home rule. And you took that vote and decided to move forward. And Bethany, I'm not sure what date that was, but I'll need to know that at some point, the actual date where the commission made a decision to move forward with drafting a charter. So,
That was the meeting before last, whatever date that was.
right. Because
I'll
that'll
send
go.
you the date.
That'll go in the final report when we have to, so, put that together and submit that. So we're right about where we should be, where March through June, we had targeted for beginning to draft the home rule charter, and we'll start doing that this evening, working from the chart that Doug suggested and Mike Foreman and Bethany were good enough to contribute to in a few minutes here. Just so, give everyone a reality check. What that does is that leaves us July through September to basically hold public hearings, to meet with city officials, to have the solicitor review our charter, our draft charter, and write the final report for distribution. We have to get this, and I just double checked, we have to get this to the Board of Elections no less than 60 days before the general election. The general election is November 2nd. So the very latest we could get it there is September 2nd. Obviously, we don't want to wait that long. We want to get it in and give ourselves time enough to do, again, some additional public education. Because once it goes to the Board of Elections, we still have work to do. We still have, public education to do, pamphlets to hand out. We'll want to have a certain amount of copies of the charter and the final report, and we're going to want to distribute that widely. So even though things are have to be to the Board of Elections, let's say by the end of August, we're still going to have work to do to make sure that, we're successful in getting the referendum question approved on the ballot. So any questions about that? I just wanted to, we hadn't done that in a while, and I kind of wanted to do a reality check there.
Thing I wanted to add is the importance of the meeting minutes to not only memorialize actions that the Government Study Commission have taken and will take, but to also take that information, as Debbie alluded to put it into a final report that is a companion document to the Home Rule Charter draft that goes to the county election office, as Debbie reiterated, no later than September 2 of this year. So everything that has taken place and will take place needs to be memorialized in the minutes as a official document. So I just wanted to reiterate that. Also, before you go on, Debbie,
No, go ahead.
I'd like to advise that the grant contract for consultant services, as well as other Beaver Falls implementation activities for the stamp process, is now an executed document. So Debbie, you can begin the bill as of this evening.
Wow, BP.
Just wanted to put it out there. I sent a
Thank you.
copy. I sent a copy of the executed contract to Mick, so he has a copy as well.
And actually, I think, and Doug might be able to confirm this, I think the city council did a first review of the agreement, of our agreement, and they'll be scheduling a second reading on that ordinance.
Yeah, we had the first reading, so now, yeah, it'll be the second reading at the council meeting this coming Tuesday. Yep.
All right, once it's approved, I would like a copy of the executed professional services agreement between Grassroots Solutions and the city of Beaver Falls for my records.
Well, thank you for everyone. I'm pleased and happy to be continuing to work with the commission. I think it's a great opportunity for me to continue with this process, and I'm excited about it. So thank you, everybody who was involved. Any questions on the schedule? Everybody's good with the schedule?
Yep.
We're very happy as well, Debbie. I just want to squeeze that in here. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay. So like I said, I'll check in with the schedule every once in a while just to make sure that we're making progress and we're where we want to be and need to be as we move forward. There were two things I wanted to do tonight. One, I guess I want to check in with the commission members about the survey, because this would be a good time for us to conduct. We had talked about a citizen survey, a resident survey, and asking for some feedback. I think it becomes even more important in this COVID environment where we can't really get out and get to meetings and get feedback from people in person. So I think that having, this electronic survey out there and distributing it as widely as we can and getting as much feedback as we can now while we're drafting, because it becomes important as you draft these sections to really know what the residents are thinking, feeling, what they're willing to support and what they're not willing to support. So I think it's important, but certainly it's your decision as to whether to move forward with the survey.
I think we should move forward with the survey because I'm hearing rumblings of a anti-charter group starting to form. And they're going to be putting effort into convincing people that this should not be voted for. So we need to get as much information about what the public's thinking as soon as possible, so we can kind of steer that, different way.
I'll put up, if I can, let's see. It's always tricky here to share these things. Let me see if I can see it. Put the proposed survey up. Okay, there it is. Okay, yeah, I think the survey does, a couple things. Obviously, it gives you some guidance from people, but it serves a sort of a public education purpose also. You can see, and I had sent this out in advance, it basically just gives some very brief comments about, the study commission, how it was formed, what is home rule, a little paragraph here about what is home rule, and then ask the residents to answer a few questions. I think we keep it relatively short. In the past, when, I've set these up, we asked people whether they were a resident and to provide an address. And quite honestly, the way I set up the survey is if you say no, or if you don't provide an address, you can't go forward. Because you don't want people who are not residents to be able to conduct the survey. Can someone fake the system? Yeah, they probably can, but are they going to go to that trouble to do that? Probably not. If you ask them if they're a resident and they say no, they're not able to basically go forward with the survey. And then the addresses just kind of give you some idea of where they the responses are coming from. Now, I put some questions in here, but you may have other questions on your mind. This is obviously just a first draft. And if you have other things that you think are more important, or questions that I hadn't even thought about that you wanted to consider, we can certainly do it, add things, take things off, whatever you think are most important. The way we did this is we had people rank their most important to least important categories or characteristics of city government. And as you can see, we had financial responsibility, responsiveness to residents, transparency, open records, accountability, access to city services. But you can actually have anything you want here and ask people to rank them, and it gives you some idea of what's on people's minds again. So some of these questions, like I said, may be relevant, may not be. In this particular case, we wanted to have, we wanted to know how people preferred to get their information, if they have a question or complaint. And this actually helps you when you're doing your public education to know how people would like to get their information. Do they want an email? Do they like in person? We asked who was most responsive currently to city requests for service and complaints. And again, some of this is just background information that helps you to sort of get a frame of reference about your residents. How effectively has the city answered and responded? And then we get into like some specific things about the charter. Currently, and this still says Newcastle, sorry about that. But currently, the city has 5 council members. Is this the right number? Should there be more? Should there be less? What's your opinion, or if you don't have an opinion? This whole issue around how do you want your council members to be elected? And we talked about this at the last meeting, at large, by district, and tell them a little bit about what that means. And then, or some at large and some by district. And then the other thing that other two issues that we addressed in this particular survey were, real estate taxes and earned income taxes. Which of the following, and we put recognizing that no one likes to pay taxes, but which of the following is the better method? And real estate, earned income, or some combination. And people generally said in this survey that some combination was the best. And then finally, about the day-to-day operation, who should have primary authority for overseeing the departments in terms of the day-to-day operation. So again, these are some questions, but I'd like to hear again from the commission. Do these make sense? Do you have other questions? Are there some on here you say we don't need to? You have to keep it relatively short or people won't answer. They get tired in the middle and just say, forget it, I'm not going to finish it. I'll be honest, when we did this up in Newcastle, the thing that was most enlightening was this, right? Question 11, provide comments. And we got, I think, over 200 comments. And some were relevant, some not so much. Some were just, complaints. People like to, fill in the complaints, but we did find it pretty, I think in Newcastle, there were over 400 responses, and the commission did find it relatively informative about, things that were relevant to the commission. Some, again, some not so relevant, others were more relevant. So I'll quit talking and you guys can discuss what you want to do and how you want to do it.
Can I add a comment?
Can you hear Michael?
Sort of,
You might have to be a little bit louder.
or a little closer maybe
I
than
just
mine.
had a comment on one of the questions. That's all. Question 7. I don't think it's relevant.
The number of council members.
What they do in Newcastle is really not relevant to what.
Oh, that's going to say Beaver Falls.
No,
That's-
that will say Beaver Falls. Yeah, that's a typo on my part. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's going to
No,
say,
that would say Beaver Falls.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
So would we put this survey on Facebook on the city's webpage, and how else do we distribute this?
through
Yeah,
our own social media.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way. You can have a certain number of paper copies if you want to have places where people can pick them up and drop them off. You would put it on Facebook if the city would put it on maybe the front page. What you're going to put is the link. I would set it up on what's called SurveyMonkey. And then all you do is put the link wherever you can, as many places as you can distribute it. And then people can just, log into the link.
I'm really interested in doing a mailing as well, like a physical mailing to as many people as possible. I know that you're only going to get a certain amount of responses any direction you go. But if we really want to educate people, I think putting this in their hands physically is a really good place to go personally.
Do we as a
I agree,
community-
Bethany. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yes.
This is Kirsten. I think it's really important because I think part of the problem is that we're currently experiencing is just because a lot of people don't know. And it's not necessarily all like willful disengagement. I just think, we have a whole section of the population. We know our concentration of elderly people is extremely high, but those are also people that vote. So I think it's super important to make sure that we're communicating in ways that reach all the demographics of the city, not just the people that are using the internet. But I think it's important to put it on the internet for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea. If you have a place where people can drop it off or mail it in. The problem with mailing it in, sometimes people won't make the effort to do that. But actually, if you put on the right here, if you put at the bottom that they can log on to this website, you know, they can do that too. So even if they have a paper copy, they could log in, or you could have an email address where they can, you know, mail it if they want, scan it, mail it. You can do it a number of ways.
Now, being that we have no money, I mean, it would be nice if we could mail it with a postpaid envelope for them to send back. But, you know, who ends up footing the bill for that?
So I'll actually, Mike Foreman, I'll defer to you a little bit on this. The law basically says that the city pays for any expenses related to especially the publications and printing, right? I mean, I think it says reasonable expenses or something, language to that effect.
That's correct. The home rule statute, home rule law and optional plans law does require that city council allocate funding to the Home Rule Government Study Commission to carry out its charge, its responsibility. And that was broached several months ago with regard to seeing what type of funding city council could appropriate to the Government Study Commission to carry out its function, one of which is mailings, communication. We're covering the consultant services for Debbie and Bonnie. So again, it's really needs to circle back to city council as to what they could appropriate and set aside. And it would be a matter of the Government Study Commission incurring costs and the city actually paying for it, rather than the Home Rule Government Study Commission, you know, having its own bank account or, you know, having its own checking account, things like that. But again, this has to be worked out with council and the Government Study Commission to at least put together some preliminary cost figures
So
through
is that something we should
November.
like, sorry, but should we go to like a city council meeting and request funding, or how do we ask them? Like, what's the protocol for that?
Well, the protocol would be to put together a proposed budget. The Government Study Commission would put together a proposed budget with some estimated figures and take that to council for discussion. And, you know, if it's a final decision, council would vote on it.
And we can help you with a budget. There's some that are, I think, examples of them in the publication, the Home Rule Study publication. But we can help you put a budget together and a request to council. But yeah, that would be, you should probably make a formal request once we decide how much advertisement and what we think the costs are going to be.
And in addition, the budget and the actual costs for the Government Study Commission to carry out its charge is part of the final report that goes with the Home Rule Charter to the county election office. That's an element of the final report Debbie and Bonnie will put together.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, and we don't have to decide it tonight, but it's something to be thinking about, is eventually some communities print enough copies of the charter that they can be distributed pretty widely, if not to every household. That's, you know, maybe a little bit of overkill. Not everyone is going to want maybe a copy of the charter, but it's a decision that the commission can make. And we should think about that, you know, moving forward, because the city, again, would have to foot the bill for something like that.
Thank you.
Any
So
other, go ahead, I'm
the
sorry.
mechanics of that would be to get a proposal together. I have no idea what a mailing would cost to everybody. And my guess is that it would be cost prohibitive to include a self-addressed stamped envelope, because enormous amounts of that would totally be unused, and I think you'd incur a huge expense to do that. I mean, it should pretty much double your expense, but But I don't know. I don't know how much it would cost to mail something to everybody in the city.
Well, this is Kirsten again. I'd love to talk to somebody like Carl Chappell at Minuteman
Right.
Press, who does that for a job, just to see what his recommendations would be. Is there, like, I don't know how those, you know, those envelopes they send in with a lot of stuff and it says postage paid by whatever, like, do they charge you if you don't send it or only if you send it back? You know what I mean? I don't know how that stuff works. So I'm more than happy to talk to Carl about something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One
So in
other
any case-
suggestion. Please go ahead, Doug.
Once you get an idea on the amount, you know, and decide this is what we want to ask council for, then you need to contact Paula so that Paula can place that on the agenda for the council meeting. Does it have to be on the agenda? No, you could come in person with something and just present it at a council meeting without it being on the agenda. But if you can get it on the agenda, that works better.
One other source to consider for funding, maybe reaching out to I'll use these terms generically, a corporate sponsor, a nonprofit sponsor, or a retail sponsor, relative to costs that you would incur that could be covered by a third party. There would be a nonpartisan type of donation contribution. Something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I've done this more with comprehensive plans than with charters, but it's just sending a postcard to every household with a little bit of information about where you can get a ballot or how you can log in. It's not as good as sending everyone a survey, but at least it alerts them to the fact that they're available and that they can log into our website.
The only comment I
I
was,
think that's a good idea, Debbie. And if we could provide those at common places, if we could have paper copies, I mean, I don't know the feasibility and, you know, safekeeping of that, but like, we could have some at the library, we could have some at other centralized locations. I mean, there's so many buildings where people live in town. I'm wondering if there's a possibility of us even just, you know, passing things out or distributing things there. I mean, rather than mailing them. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm getting a lot of good ideas right now. So, thanks.
Yeah,
I think.
Excuse- I'm sorry.
Can you hear Michael Michael Anderson? I don't think they can. You have to bring up the. bring that
You
out.
know, Michael could call in like I did, and then it would be like a microphone for him. So you'd have the video and the phone.
He's in the room.
I have one comment. I was gonna
Excuse
say,
me. I got a question.
Have a way of doing it.
Can they hear me?
Okay, yeah, Neil, Michael was in the middle of saying Paula may already have a way of doing this with mailings.
Oh, okay. I got kicked off for a minute. and
Okay, we can hear you.
I wasn't sure what we were talking about. Somebody suggested to me as far as like mailing out stuff, like maybe having the school send it home with the students.
Yeah, that has to go through Dr. Nugent and be approved by her.
I don't think that would be a problem.
We never know. But she can be approached, but we just never know what she's gonna say can be sent and can't be sent.
Really?
Yeah,
And we can ask the treasurer's office, because they send out the per capita taxes in January, how much it costs them to send all those
Yeah.
out. So that probably be in the ballpark as far as that cost.
yeah.
so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and another idea I had, what if we put this survey as an ad in the newspaper?
Mhm.
That would have, you know, both of these pages as an ad, and then that would alert a lot of people to maybe go to the website and actually answer the survey.
That would be great. I know that, again, in Newcastle, they actually ran the link. And so a lot of people that get their newspapers online or, otherwise were able just to log in from that link. So a lot of times they'll do that just as a public service.
I'm still a big fan of making sure that people who are not comfortable, like the older people who are not maybe getting left behind in the digital age, also have this in their hands too. Yeah, I think it's definitely
What
worth
about-
talking to Minuteman, like you said, Kirsten, about what it costs to do this. Actually, this is what my dad used to do for a business, and I know it's not really that expensive municipally. So it's worth checking. And I'd also, if it's okay, I'd have some things to say about the content of the.
I was just gonna ask, I was gonna ask to go to content if there's about what is actually, what questions we actually add.
I would say personally, I love how you have the what is home rule thing in there. I think that's really important. And I'm almost thinking it doesn't even go far enough, just based on conversations I've had with people. And the questions they kind of hit those list items that we talked about last week, like how many counselors. I think it would be beneficial to have up at the top somewhere. These are the things that home rule can decide. Here are the things that we can decide as a home rule charter thing. So because it's not as crazy as people think it is. They think it's something that it's not. And we have to work extra hard to educate about what it actually is. I think just like a line at the top, these are the things we have to decide. So, yeah.
Yeah, good comment.
Thank you.
Are there questions on here that, well, let's just go through them real quickly. The characteristics, I mean, these are things that, again, a different city identified. Are these things that are relevant here also? Or are there other things that should be included? Or do they make sense to you? Obviously if they don't make sense to you, they're not going to make sense to anybody in the community. So
I think the questions on responsiveness send the wrong signal, as if the home rule charter is going to change the responsiveness of the city. And I think responsiveness will always be an issue, no matter whether you're going third class city code or home rule charter or whatever. So I think that moves people to thinking that the home rule charter is going to solve problems like how quickly my street gets plowed, or issues like that. So I would my suggestion would be to eliminate the questions about responsiveness, because they mislead people into thinking that this home rule charter is going to solve responsiveness issues. And I don't think it will.
Well, Doug, I think your comments could apply to all of these then.
No, I think we are going to decide the number of council members. I think we are going to make decisions on taxation.
Well, I thought you were just talking about question 3.
Yeah.
So I guess, Doug, when I look at that, then you would take that off of question 3 and then.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My phone also has I can't see the questions.
Oh, okay.
If you would put that back up, that would help me.
It's up. It's up.
It's up, right? It's up now.
Okay. Sorry. Was it
That's
up
okay.
the whole time?
Yeah.
I had moved to a different screen so I could see people. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for
That's
messing you up. Okay.
So number 3, where it says
No,
responsiveness.
3's okay.
The
3's
responsiveness.
okay, because that's one around many issues. It's 5, I think.
6, I think 6. How effectively has the city
Yeah,
responded?
5. Yes.
I got you.
5
Oh, and
and,
5
yeah.
also.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying with 5.
I mean, that's an interesting question, but I think it's going to be misleading about what home rule is going to do.
I don't know about that though, Doug, because if we're talking about who is in charge of departments.
Okay, I can be talked out of 5. It would be then 6.
6 is the one.
You know, I agree with you. I agree with you about
Yeah.
6. I think 5 is kind of important because it gets around to a later question in a different
Yeah.
way.
Okay, I can be talked into that. Yeah.
Pleasure doing business
Think
with you.
5 is loaded?
That's loaded.
Michael Anderson thinks 5 is a loaded question. I'm interpreting because you can't hear him, so I'm just restating what he's saying.
That's very helpful, by the way, Regina, because I can barely hear Michael Anderson. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's trying his best to yell. He really is.
I don't have,
That's what I was getting at. If he called in, like mine, it's like a microphone just on the phone, then it would give him like a microphone into the meeting if that's an option for him. If he has a phone there.
Does anybody have the phone number handy?
I might. Actually, Neil, I got kicked out too at the same time you did on my own Chromebook.
Is Neil still with us?
He is. He's muted.
I didn't know if he got kicked out again.
No, he's muted. but
No,
he's-
I'm here. Yeah, I'm on my laptop too and got kicked out.
So, so is there consensus then we take 6 off?
I can, yeah,
I agree with that.
I agree with that.
Cause that's
Okay.
like finger pointing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's distracting.
Okay, any other questions that are not relevant or you would prefer not to have answered? What about, are we missing something that might be valuable feedback for us?
Is there anything on that list of decisions that we need to make that isn't on here?
Yeah, it might, and maybe we move to that right now, and that might, we might think about some of these as we go down the list that we might want to ask the residents about. So, I mean, just to summarize where we are, we're going to do a survey. We're going to continue to figure out how best to distribute it. Certainly paper copies and an electronic link, but other ways along the line that we can figure out to distribute it. We're going to include some of this information, but I think Bethany, you asked if it could be expanded to include, here are the things that we can affect, here are the things that maybe we cannot affect, or something to that, or, you know, sort of a, we can do this, we can't do this, kind of 2 columns here. And I can work on that and send out a new draft. And then eliminating this number 6 about effectiveness of the city response. Anything else before we leave this, recognizing that it's a work in progress and we can still make additions and changes as we go along.
Will there be a deadline for submission added to it?
Yeah, there are definitely, I would say maybe by our next meeting, if we could have a final version, because then I can't put the survey on the link until we have a final version of what it's gonna
Well,
be.
I meant for the actual final version of the survey. Is there going to be a deadline for the community to get?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Whatever you guys decide is the most useful for you. I mean, you would want to leave it open for at least a month, maybe even 2 months. It's up to you, but yeah, you can set a deadline and then I'll just close it at the end of that session.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, I'm gonna take that down.
Michael has one more thing.
Oh, sure.
question 6, and this, someone could just take me if I'm wrong. How effectively has the city responded? And I think that should say city manager.
He was asking for question 6, if anybody could answer how effectively the city's management has been responding.
Or city government.
Well, I thought there was a consensus to eliminate
Get
that.
rid of 6, yeah.
Oh, 6 is leaving?
6 is going.
I thought 5 was gone.
No, 5 staying.
All right, I'm sorry.
It's okay, we'll get him later.
All right.
I think he took a nap over there for a minute.
No, no, no.
We all do that from time to time, right? Okay, the other thing that I wanted to start, and we'll probably only get through, I know we don't want to be on too long, but maybe if we could get through a couple, 1 or 2 of the sections each time we meet, or more, depending on how much time we have. I mean, Regina, how long do you want to run the meeting? Another half hour or so?
We've been usually sticking between an hour to an hour and a half.
Yeah. So I think we can get through at least the first couple items. Let me put them up. Okay. Let me zoom that a little bit. Can everyone see, make it a little bit bigger. Everyone see that? This is the chart. Mike Foreman had started it. I stole some of it from him. Bethany had added some questions. This is the one actually, I think, Doug, that you asked that we could
Yes.
pull together, because this really has all the various sections that we're going to have to address, moving forward. And by doing this, we can really start to write the charter, the various sections. And I'll have a template, and as we write these sections, we'll pull them into the template, and magically a charter will appear at some point during all of this. So, so the first section, probably, we'll want to spend some time on this. Now, we already decided that some of these questions will go to on the survey also. So whatever we decide may or may not, be redefined at a later date. But I think this is where we really need to start. We did have a little bit of a discussion about this last time, but these are, important issues around the mayor and council. So what we want to talk about is the number of council members. Obviously, they're going to be staggered terms, and whether or not they're elected at large or by district. So let's open it up maybe to those first 2 things first, and see where people are coming down on those 2 issues.
Okay, I'm going to propose really that we keep what we have now, which is 5 council members, and that all 5 are elected at large. I think that by district is interesting, but in my mind, too complicated. And I think these are 2 questions that we could keep the same, so it wouldn't cause more discussion if we tried to be changing things. I don't think either of those questions is where issues or real major problems for the city are occurring.
I would agree with Doug.
That was Jerry, right?
Yeah, that was Jerry.
With the caveat, we're going to discuss the role of the mayor as far as council.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, then I was going to move on to that after we talk about the number and how the elections.
How do the, now I got an answer.
Yeah, no, they won't hear you.
How do the current council members line up with wards or their areas?
They don't at all. There's no connection to wards. It's all at large, the total city.
Okay, so,
So you could wind up with a council composed of all College Hill members or all Mount Washington members or all downtown members. It's a possibility.
all right, that's good, yeah, all right. Thank you.
What about everybody else? We heard from Jerry and Michael, Doug.
Does the number 5 seem to represent, I know that everybody's from all sorts of different, like technically are from all different wards right now. Does 5 do a good job of representing as many people as possible without being overwhelming? Doug, I guess.
In my opinion, it goes up and down. I think when I initially ran, that I just felt like there weren't many people interested in being on council. So making more council members seemed like that would be harder. But I think it goes so long, and then then there's an issue, and then a lot of people get involved in that, and then so I think that goes up and down. But I think for the size of the city, I think 5 works well without being a great big unwieldy number. And I don't think it disenfranchises groups in the city. I think the key is in a group that would feel disenfranchised, can they put somebody to run in the race for council? I think that's more the key.
And if they're at large, then they have that freedom.
Right. Good point.
What are the term limits for council members?
4 years. 4 years, and now there are no term limits.
No,
So
that's not a
no
term
term
limit.
limits. You
No,
just
no.
have to be. There are no term limits. You just have to be reelected every 4 years.
What about having the mayor as one of the 5?
That's the next question, Ray.
Yeah, and we could certainly include that as part of this discussion. So that's right, another decision point. The mayor may be a member of council elected separately by the voters, or the mayor may be elected by council, by the council members themselves as the presiding officer. So you could have 5 council members elected at large, and then those council members vote to identify one of their members as mayor and as the presiding officer of the council. That's similar to, if you think boroughs work that way, basically, they are all elected and then they decide who's going to be their council president, who's going to be the deputy or the vice president. But that would, everyone would then be elected as a council member. And then the other, what we looked at, the other model was actually the office of mayor is completely eliminated. And you just basically have 5 council members. And that was the Sharon model, if you recall, when we looked at the city of Sharon.
So in my move already at the beginning, just a reminder that I've already, by saying 5 council members, I'm already saying that the mayor is a council member, because there are only really 4 city councilmen and then the mayor. So when I'm saying 5, and the mayor's allowed to vote currently as part of the council. And so when I get to the mayor question, I would say that I'd still be in favor of an elected mayor, but that would be council, that would be one of those 5 council members. So I would say that a ballot would look exactly as a ballot looks now. And the mayor would be one of the 5 voting council members.
So the mayor would be exactly as he is today, other than the fact that he wouldn't be in charge of the police department.
That's correct. Yep.
So where does the police department go then?
It goes where every other thing goes. So I as a council member would not be the head of the code office any longer, the head of the fire department any longer. But all council members would oversee all departments, but the focus would move to the city manager to
Right.
oversee.
Right, the third, right.
Yeah,
The third item here that we get on is when we'll look at the city manager's authority and threshold qualifications and all of that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good description of how it would be. Would basically be a mayor who is elected independently, but becomes the presiding officer of council and one of the 5 council members. Which is really not much of a change from what you have currently. Does that seem like where you want to be headed?
I would say yes.
Seems like the number 5 is an efficient number when it comes to voting on ordinances and any changes that would have to be made. You know, as Doug was saying, anything more would start to get cumbersome, I think, when it comes to getting things done.
For what it's worth, and I've worked with every type of municipality and authorities out there, 5 is the magic number. 3 is too little. More than 5, I've worked with boards of 7 and 9. It's, in my opinion, 5 is the number for what that's worth.
And that
that's
5
helpful.
Very helpful.
That 5 includes the mayor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. The one other thing that has to be included in this section is the threshold requirements and compensation that will appear in this section with the mayor and council. Typically, I mean, the only requirements are usually that there may be an age requirement and there may be a residency requirement. Michael, have you seen anything other than that that's included in that section?
I've also seen where the member who's elected has to be a registered voter and live within the community for at least 1 year prior to the date in which they can circulate nomination petitions or date that they take office.
We pretty much could copy over what's in the 3rd class city code already, is it not?
I believe the 3rd class city code talks about age and residency, but I'm not sure it talks about being a registered voter.
You have to be a registered voter to get on the ballot, though.
I believe, it's my opinion, if you're gonna hold any of these offices, you should be a resident of Peterborough.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
So, that would automatically set an age because you have to be 18 to register to vote. So
Yeah,
that we're thinking.
yeah.
I think so.
Mhm.
And reside within the 15010 zip code.
No.
No,
City
No.
of Beaver Falls.
City of Beaver
No,
Falls.
it's smaller
Oh,
than
so
that.
you're
It has
not
to be the
one
city
fifth the whole
proper.
zip code?
Well, Chippewa is 0.501.
Yeah,
You don't want somebody from Chippewa to be on council.
that is correct. Okay, that's a good point. I
It
was
has to
not
be the
looking-
city. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
That's a point of confusion for thousands of people.
Yep.
yeah.
Let me ask Bonnie a question. It's Michael from DCD. What have you seen with regard to being a resident of this municipality at least 1 year, prior to when you circulate nomination petitions, or 1 year from when you take office? Or from 1 year from the election, general election?
Usually, yeah, the most of the codes that I am recalling, it's 1 year prior to the election.
The general election,
Yes, the
not the
general
primary.
election.
Not the primary. Okay,
Right,
okay.
because it's the general that, you're elected. And I guess I guess you could make it the primary. Although that's what I'm just looking. I think I'm not. Yeah, I guess we could include stuff like that. I'll have to double check that. Because I know there's a restriction, you can't do anything contrary to the elections code, but that would just be the conduct of elections, not eligibility.
Right, the PA election code prevails over any home rule charter.
Right, yeah, so that wouldn't have anything to do with eligibility. That would just be the conduct of the election.
Right, right.
Would it make sense to be a resident 1 year prior to filing your petition?
Well, I think if you're going to put any restriction in, it makes more sense to make it that they can't even be in the mix if they're not going to ultimately
Right.
be able to.
That's what
serve.
I'm thinking. It might make more sense that they have to be a resident when they file their petition.
Mhm.
What do you mean with the county election office?
Right, to run.
Yeah.
Right. Which would be what, usually March before the primary.
13 Tuesdays
Right.
for the primary, yeah. Which
Because
is-
that way you don't get us into a situation where you get somebody elected in a primary that might not qualify,
Right.
in the long term.
And then you'd be in a battle about whether or not they were a resident. I think they should be a resident before they can file.
Yeah,
But-
that makes the most sense.
Great.
Has anybody seen, Michael, Bonnie, any other requirements that make sense for positions of mayor and council?
I think I'm getting beyond the scope of this initial discussion, but I know I've worked with charters that have a provision in it that you can't run for office if you have been convicted of any type of crime of dishonesty. It doesn't make, point being, you're not eligible to run, with regard
Yeah.
to that type of status. Against,
Bonnie and I just, we did some research on that for another community, and the case law, and I'll defer to you, Bonnie, but the case law basically said that there's only certain kind of felonies that can be considered, and I think that there had to be an indictment from the AG or DA or something before someone could be disqualified. I remember reading it. I know, Bonnie, you did the research.
Yeah, well, you're getting into two different things. There's the provisions, it starts with the PA Constitution that, and I'm not going to use the exact language, but basically what Michael said, it was a law about crimes of dishonesty, and it's kind of some archaic language. And then the courts further define it, and it goes into identifying some of the specific crimes that would fall into that category. So then if you have somebody that's elected where that has happened, then you go into a quo warranto action. I know this is getting more technical than you want probably, and that's where it has to go through the district attorney's office, or the attorney general's office has to bring the charge to remove the elected official. If you also are going to get into, if you put that in there as an eligibility to run, you have the potential for litigation of, what was the person convicted of and whether it falls under that definition. That's what happened years ago. I had a case, we were representing Clairton, and the guy was on the ballot. Then there was the quo warranto action was filed. He served out his full term before the litigation ended. So
Yeah, I remember that. I was there. I remember that.
Desiderio.
Yeah, Red. Good old Red Desiderio.
Red Desiderio. Yep.
That's him.
Well, this is Kirsten. Just out of curiosity, there's somebody. This was just in the headlines in Beaver County because somebody, I think it was in Ambridge, is either a mayor or city council, and he had to resign because he was a felon.
Because of why?
He was a convicted felon.
Okay.
So
yeah,
I think it can be.
Oh, you definitely can use it. It just like, so for example, if that person refused to resign and said, well, sue me and we're going to litigate this, I guess I just want you to be aware that it's not necessarily foolproof.
So you could include the language, but you better be prepared to litigate if there is a circumstance where the person refuses to step down.
Yes. Now, the upside, if it's in there, it might keep people from even attempting to run. You'd have, there would be a certain amount of deterrent. But just so I just want everybody to be clear, because everyone thinks, well, if it says it, that means it can't happen. Well, that's not the case. So.
See, the overarching.
I'm.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
No, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I guess I'm of the mind that if somebody that had a felony in their past, but they, could turn their life around enough to get enough votes to be elected on city council and they wanted to participate in civic government, I guess I'm of the mind that I would be happy to have them there. But I suppose it would depend on a lot of other variable factors. So.
One point I want to make, it's really an overarching theme, is that when you get into this type of arena with people of this type of status, it brings a stigma and besmirches and poorly reflects on the entire governing body, if not the entire municipality. When you get into this dynamic. So putting language in a home rule charter, as Bonnie was saying, to try to act as a deterrent, it only serves the municipality to try to not be victimized by that type of, again, dynamic. So just sharing a.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't hurt to have it in there, but I just want everybody to be clear that it's not always cut and dry.
The third-class city code doesn't even address those kind of things, does it?
No.
Again,
But
this is a constitutional issue. It's a
Right.
constitutional issue.
Remember that as long as it doesn't prohibit, you're not prohibited, you can include it in your home rule charter. So just because it's not in the third class city doesn't mean, or third class city code doesn't mean that you can't have it. But I think what Bonnie is pointing out is that it doesn't mean that it will hold up if there's a challenge.
Have you worked with any cities that have included it in the charter?
Clairton?
I have.
Yeah,
So Clairton has it? I haven't gone through Clairton.
yeah, that's where it came from. That was a home rule charter community, and it was a home rule charter provision.
Yeah.
And if my recollection is, and Michael, you guys would know better than I, but wasn't that there was a provision in the charter that if you got 100 names on a petition and the person was a convicted felon, that you could remove that person from office?
Well,
It was
that,
something like that. I can't remember exactly, but yeah.
and it gets into recall, which is not prohibited. Sorry, it's unconstitutional in Pennsylvania for recall.
Right.
That may be implied in this petition drive with regard to removing someone. I mean, you know, as Bonnie was saying, my experience has always been that the courts remove as part of a sentence, along with, you know, an AG or a DA quo warranto, which, if I understand it correctly, it's Latin for what is the law, right, Bonnie?
Mhm. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, you're refreshing my memory, Debbie. That was the issue, whether that provision in Clareton's Home Rule Charter could supersede the normal requirement of an action quo warranto. And the charter provision was stricken.
So back to the commission members, is there a desire to have some language like that in your charter?
I think we should put it in to see what it looks like. See if
Yeah.
It makes sense.
But please give us some samples of things that work. And then we can decide whether we want to put it in or not.
Okay,
Thank you.
Bonnie, you can help me write that piece of it and see if we can fashion something that might hold up.
Sure. You and I can regroup and work on that.
Anything else about mayor and council? The compensation, typically, it can only be adjusted prior to petitions being filed for an election. And again, I'll refer to Michael and Bonnie on that, but typically the charter basically says that the mayor or that the council decides the compensation, but it can only be adjusted prior to the filing of petitions.
That's correct, which is normally by February 15, because that's the day, that's the deadline threshold in order for a municipality to change the compensation for an elected tax collector, which again, February 15 is right before the date when nomination petitions may begin to be circulated.
That's right. Once you have people circulating petitions, you can't change, because they're entitled to rely on what the provisions were when they decided to run for office.
And the Home Rule Charter basically has to follow that process, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's in the Constitution, the Pennsylvania Constitution, yes.
So there will be language in that section that basically spells that out, that the only time the compensation would be set by the council, and that the only time it can be changed is every 4 years when those petitions are circulated.
It has to be changed by that threshold
Well,
deadline.
you know, I take that back, Deb. You could change it any time, but it would
Right.
only be effective
Right.
going forward for people running for office after the date of enactment. You couldn't go back.
Right.
So you could do it, say, February 16th, but it wouldn't apply for anybody running that election. It would only apply to, say, the next election.
When the new governing body takes office.
Right.
And is there compensation currently for the council members? I assume there's some small,
Yeah,
about
there's
10 cents an hour or something.
Hey,
like-
yeah, it's what it works out to. It's $2,000 a year, and I believe the mayor is higher. I think the mayor's 2,500. Maybe Jerry, can you vouch for me on that?
Well, that's what it was, but I think we just increased that not too long ago. I think council gets 2,500. I think George gets 3 or 35. I'm not sure.
Oh, I'm getting more now. Sorry, I'm getting more than I thought I was.
Just have direct deposit.
It's a windfall. It's a windfall.
Yes.
Give it back.
So, yeah, and there'll be a section at the end of the charter it talks about transition. So as you transition into the new charter, certain things will stay the same for a certain amount of time. So we'll get to that, but that'll be much later on about how it transitioned. You want to try one more section and then we'll call it a night? We can talk a little bit about the ordinances.
Can I just real quick before we move on, I want to make sure that I have in the minutes exactly what we've kind of gone, make sure I have it right.
Sure.
For this mayor council section, I have so far keeping it to 5 councilors with staggered terms, voted at large for 4-year overlapping terms with no term limits, right?
Well, it's actually 4 council members
4 council members and a mayor, right?
and the mayor.
4
Right.
council members and the mayor, who's
And the
elected
mayor is
separately.
elected independently from the council.
Okay, great. And what else did I have here? And we talked about threshold requirements and
Right.
composition. Okay. Did I
Being
get
a
it all?
registered voter,
Registered voter.
city 1 year prior to filing the petition, and language about the convicted felon,
Being at least 18.
Mhm.
yeah, and the age, about being at least 18.
Well,
Right.
If we look at Clareton's though, I think they have the age at 20. They must, 21. The councilman must be at least 21 years of age. They made them be at least 21. Because 18 is a little young.
If you convert, you should be able to serve.
Yeah, working with teenagers all day, I know they're not all that. They think they can handle the responsibility, but
There's
you know.
50-year-olds doing all that too.
So I kind of like the age being 21. Let's take it to the drinking age.
Yeah.
That's reasonable.
Yeah.
And is that for the council and the mayor? Because those are going to be 2 separate sections, so you could set different threshold qualifications for the
I
mayor.
would,
I think it's important to be consistent.
yeah, I wouldn't either.
I'm not gonna make a big deal about this, but my feeling is if you're old enough to vote, you should be old enough to run. So if 18's the age on voting, which it is, then I think an 18-year-old should have the opportunity to run. If I don't know many 18-year-olds that could pull together, you know, the petitions and keeping track of the dates and all that stuff. I'll admit I can't do all that without having people help me and remind me and help me along. So, but I'm not, you know, if the council decide, or if this group decides 21, that's fine too.
I agree with you, Doug. And I think Jerry, was it you that said they're old enough to serve in the military? You know, or old enough to do certain things. I think that civic engagement. And didn't Pittsburgh have the mayor of Pittsburgh, wasn't he like 20 when he was elected or something? Wasn't he really young?
I was Ravenstall. I think he was
Ravenstall, yeah.
mid-20s.
Okay.
Mid-20s.
He was mid-20s, yeah.
Gotcha.
He was one of the youngest of a major city. I think that's what you're thinking of.
Yeah, I think so.
He was
Anyway.
very young.
Yeah, I agree with you, Doug. I don't think this is the be all end all, but I do like that, like keeping it consistent with the voting age. If you're 18 and you can pull all that together, then you can probably be a council member.
Debbie, can I ask one question to be along this section that we're talking about? I noticed in some of the home rule charters, they have term limits, and I'm not suggesting that we do that, but does anybody want to have a discussion on that or not? In the commission?
I don't recommend it. You can lose some really good people. But that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, it seems like the voters should get to decide, right?
Okay.
Anyone think it's a good idea or want to discuss it?
A lot of committees I'm on have a 1 year off and then you can come back. If that were what it was, 1 year off and then you could come back, I think I'd go for it. But if you're off for 4 years that's a long time, and I think you're gonna probably more likely disengage. And I think then you run into what Bonnie's talking about, which is losing people that are really providing valuable service.
Yeah, and I think it's different too if you have a whole lot of people that are interested in running. But I know that most communities have trouble filling the positions that they have. They don't always have a lot of people who are interested in public service.
I think anything that you could potentially gain is so minuscule versus what you have a potential to lose, and that is good people that bring experience to the table, who are interested in the community. In my experience, the communities that have had them have just lost a lot of talent.
That's helpful. Thank you.
So I don't want to keep people too long, but here's something maybe you can think about, and we'll start here next week. The section on ordinances. So right now, you have to adopt your budget by ordinance. There's certain things in the code that require ordinances. You don't have to continue to do that under a home rule. Sometimes it helps expedite things and save some advertising expenses and otherwise if you don't have those requirements. Obviously, you need them for setting your tax rates, and there are certain state laws that require that you have an ordinance. For instance, your zoning ordinance, your building codes. There are certain things that you are required to use an ordinance for those purposes. But maybe that could be sort of some of the homework, and we can come back and have a discussion about this. But if you think about it, you could do some of that work by resolution or even by motion, and save yourself some time. Right now, the Third Class City Code requires a first reading, a second reading, an advertisement. You know, so sometimes it delays certain things that you wish you could get done quicker.
That's in the code, did you say, Debbie?
Yeah, it's in the Third Class City Code that you have to do a first reading, a second reading before you
Yeah,
can
that's
adopt the ordinance.
yeah, that's archaic. I would definitely recommend changing that.
We don't have
So
private need to do it.
you may want to think about that, and we can pick up there at the next meeting. I can give you a list of, you know, ordinances so you can get a feel for which ones you currently have to do by ordinance and what relief that might give you. And you could write language, like I said, that it would still be required for setting taxes and all of those things that the state requires you to adopt an ordinance for, but it could give you some relief on some other things. And we can talk about, you know, how many times you're going to read them. Hopefully it'll just be once. Effective dates, advertising requirements, things like that. And I know, Jerry, you have a whole bunch of home rule charters there. You might want to check some of those and see what, you know, what's typical and how those are typically handled, and we can pick up there next time.
All right.
Yeah, one thing you want to think about, I think, is the advertising requirements, because that's an enormous expense to place ads in the paper, and so few people read the paper anymore. I think that's one we'll want to take a look at. So, yep, that'd be good to talk about next time.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to look at that. I don't know if we can I mean, we can definitely change the number of readings, but I don't know if we can change the 7-day advertisement.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's good.
Actually, actually, Bonnie, the I know John's. Yeah, but no, it's not. Johnstown, actually, there's only certain ordinances they even require advertisement in their home.
Yeah,
there's a-
I was,
Yeah, there's
All
a
right,
number
so
of
you know the-
variations on that.
okay. All right, I wasn't sure if you could do that or not. Okay.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do for the next meeting is maybe taking the information from what we talked about tonight, start to pull that section together on the mayor and council. We can take a look at that and then start with the ordinances and city manager for next meeting, if that works for everyone.
Works for me.
Great.
Let me just real quick double check. So Kirsten's going to check with Minuteman on advertising. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll talk to Carl about the cost of a mailer and with all sorts of different variations, whether it's with return postage or not for a survey. Yep.
Okay. And do you want, is Neil still on?
I'm here.
Do you want me to ask Donna or do you want to ask Donna?
I can ask her.
Okay, so then we have you doing that.
Yeah, I'll ask her.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure who was doing which job for
Right, I got
the
you.
future. Okay. All right. So if all minds are clear, we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Well, I don't know if you beat Doug or not, so we're gonna let Doug have this one. And Jerry seconded it. Good discussion. Thank you for all your
Yep.
hard work. It's much appreciated.
Nice to get started on the drafting, isn't it?
Yeah, that's.
Oh,
Yes,
my
it is. Yep.
Okay. Night, everybody.
Nice.
Nice
Thank
to
you all
meet
so
you
Good
much.
all.
all.
Night.
Mike, it was good to see you.
Bye, everyone. Good night.
Take care.
Nice to meet you, Bonnie.
You too. Bye-bye.